I was invited here to provide the broad strokes of the Philippine economy. And Fred was talking about the promises of business in this country. Now let me contextualize that micro discussion to the macro picture of the economy. So let me talk about the big picture. And here, let me talk about the economy, the prospects of growth, what can we expect about price movements, the exchange rate, and where is small and medium business in this bigger scheme of things. So let me talk about the economy in broad strokes. Well, BSP is the central bank of the Philippines. It's supposed to handle not only monetary policy, issuance of the currency, but also to supervise banks. In short, we are engaged in promoting a stable economic and financial environment. And we engage with the business sector in the sense that productive resources of the economy, which are made available by the domestic capital markets, the banking system, this is where your businesses derive the resources to run their business. And of course, we're also engaged with the government. The government is in charge of fiscal policy, collecting taxes, revenues, and spending them to provide infrastructure so that you have a good context for business and the economy. Now, what is small business in this big picture? This chart will show that of all the different sectors in the economy, you have a lot of businesses in the small areas of the economy. But 99.6 would actually refer to wholesale and retail trade. In other words, services. And then you would have I, that is food and different types of services as well. And manufacturing is the third. That's item C, is about 25. Now, in these big companies, okay, these are the bigger ones because of the number of businesses, the average number of workers or employees is just about 10. In short, there is a smallness in the big sector of the economy. Now, we can contextualize this, the prospect of small business in the larger picture of the economy. Small businesses have a good promise because the Philippine economy has experienced 77 quarters of uninterrupted economic growth, which means for 19 years since 1999, the economy has growing positively. In 2011, we experienced the lowest growth of 1.1% after the global financial crisis of 2007 up to 2009. But what is remarkable about this record is that there has been a structural change in the economy. If in the past, consumption expenditure alone was driving the economy, now you have private investment and government spending also providing support to the economy. On the supply side, agriculture is no longer as important as before, but still growing. And services is now providing more than 50% of the growth drivers of the economy. But what is most remarkable here is that industry, okay, particularly manufacturing and construction, is now helping drive economic growth. Why manufacturing? Why construction? Because of all the economic sectors you have, it is in manufacturing where job creation is biggest. So the manufacturing sector receives more support, and manufacturing actually shows very robust economic growth. That means that more jobs can be created, higher income can be expected from that. Now, talking about inflation, well, Richard was talking about 1,000,000% inflation in Venezuela. Well, Zimbabwe is not far behind. Actually, it is more than that. In fact, in Zimbabwe, your banknotes in Zimbabwe have a maturity. In 6 months, they are automatically demonetized. Because by that time, even if you have about 200 billion units of the Zimbabwean currency, by the time after 6 months, that would be worthless because of zillion and zillion percent of inflation. In the Philippines, when June inflation rate came out at 5.2%, we were all worried about it. But actually, if you look at the month-on-month, it has been coming down. 0.7, 0.7, 0.6, and then 0.3, 0.2. Only in June did the month-on-month go up to about 0.6%. But our basic assumption is that with all of this coming up, train 2, train 1, you have oil prices going up, and then geopolitical problems surrounding the oil industry, we would expect inflation to be about 4.5, 4.6% for the entire year of 2018. But the point that we need to emphasize here is that inflation is driven by the supply side. When it is driven by the supply side, inflation is not going to be persistent. So that by 2019, actually starting in the third quarter of this year, we expect inflation to start coming down. And by 2019, inflation is expected at between 3.3 to 3.5% based on our own forecast at this point. Between now and August 9, the next meeting of the Monetary Board, of course, this forecast is subject to change. Because by then, different developments will have happened which could affect price movements, exchange rate, etc. But at this point, what we expect is basically that which is indicated by that font chart. Okay? The highest point is expected in the third quarter of 2018, and then afterwards it goes down to around 3.3, 3.5% average for the entire year of 2019. What is also remarkable here is that if we take a look at the month-on-month, the impact of higher tax is actually transitory. It means that by the third quarter of this year, the pressure would have started to dissipate. And by the fourth quarter start coming down, and by 2019, going back to the inflation target consistent path of between 2 to 4%. Now, what has been the central bank doing in all of this? Now, supply side factors are not normally responded to by monetary policy, by increasing the policy rate or by mopping up more liquidity from the system. Normally, we don't respond to headline inflation numbers. But when we see that there are incipient second-round effects in terms of demand for higher wages, demand for higher transport fare, then the central bank starts tightening monetary policy. And this is what we actually did. From January to April, when we have not seen any sign of second-round effects, the BSP decided to keep policy rates steady. But in May and June, when oil prices continued to surge, when we saw that typhoons in the first quarter of the year started affecting fruits, vegetables, meat products, all the supply side commodities and services in the consumer price basket, that was the time that the central bank started tightening monetary policy by increasing the policy rate by 25 basis points in May and another 25 basis points in June. That's what we did. And we are prepared, the BSP is prepared to continue having a firmer hand on monetary policy moving forward. Because what we are seeing today is a continued volatility in the foreign exchange market. Again, monetary policy under the inflation targeting framework does not normally respond to changes, to volatilities in the foreign exchange market. But when we are convinced that these volatilities in the foreign exchange market, in the peso-dollar rate, it continues to surge, and it would translate into higher inflation, that's the time that we deploy monetary policy to deal with the inflationary implication of the volatile peso-dollar rate in the FX market. Now, there are buffers in the economy, and these buffers may also be found in the external sector. Number one, you have the foreign direct investment. FDIs continue to be strong in the Philippines. Second, you have structural flows coming from remittances, which provide us with about $28 billion on an annual basis. BPOs contribute about $23 to $24 billion. So these two big accounts in the current account together account for more than $50 billion every year. This is the counterweight to what we are seeing today in terms of the trade deficit. We have more imports compared to exports because the economy is growing. So you have a lot of imports for capital goods, imports of raw materials and intermediate products. If you add up raw materials, intermediate products, and capital goods, you would have about 80% of the total imports. And because the economy is growing, your trade deficit is showing this. But there's a counterweight. The counterweight is from services, remittances, and BPOs. The next buffer here, on the left side, on the bottom part, is our reserves level. We have gold, we have foreign exchange, we have foreign investments. Altogether, you have about $77 billion. And that is equivalent to about 7.5 months of imports of goods and services. Normally, the rule of thumb is about 3 to 4 months, but ours is more than double that. So we have comfortable level of foreign exchange that could provide cushion. And finally, the demand for foreign exchange coming from debt servicing. If you look at this the chart below, on the right side, you would have the external debt coming down to a high of about $78 billion several years back to just about $73 billion in the first quarter of 2018. Now, relative to the GDP, that has gone down from more than 60% about 10 years ago to just about 23%. The meaning of this is that we can devote more and more of these resources away from debt servicing to more capital spending, more infrastructure, expansion of business, etc. Now, the next issue about the economy is what market analysts would call possible overheating. We are not seeing strong signs of overheating. Okay? There is overheating when your potential output is much higher, is much lower compared to your actual output. Now, in 2018, first quarter, our real GDP went up by 6.8%. That's the actual output. What is our potential output? How much can we really grow? Based on the resources available to us, based on the labor sector, based on capital, based on our own computation, we have between 6.5 to 7%. That's our potential capacity, which means that we can handle growth rates of about 6.8% up to 7%, which means that there is no basis for saying that there is overheating in the economy. And even if credit is growing by about 19%, we are seeing that credit to GDP ratio continues to be modest at about 66.5%, one of the lowest in Asia. So the economy can grow more, domestic credit can still expand without generating pressures on overheating. Now, the other way to look at whether there is overheating in the economy is to look at some metrics, some standards. And here, both the BIS, this is the Bank for International Settlements, And the IMF, International Monetary Fund metrics, are showing that credit growth based on credit to GDP ratio relative to the trend continue to be within acceptable levels. The actual readings of the credit to GDP ratio gap based on the BIS here on the left is actually down there, okay? Those bar chart relative to the threshold of between 2 to 6%, the shaded part. In the case of the IMF threshold, okay, the cyclical patterns as well as the so-called bubble component based on real bank lending growth is way below the threshold, which means again, on both metrics, based on both standards, the economy can still accommodate additional growth of credit to fund economic growth. Now, another way of looking at it is, if there is overheating, the banks would be imprudent. The banks would forget and throw to the wind all kinds of caution with respect to their credit standards. This is not happening because on the basis of our quarterly survey of senior loan officers, the credit standards are largely unchanged. In other words, the banks continue to be prudent. They continue to look at the risks, whether it is credit, operational, reputational risks, when trying to look at the financial statements and the balance sheets of their clients. And they have kept their credit standards. Now, can we sustain this kind of growth? I think we have a basis for saying that yes, we can sustain our growth momentum. On 3 counts. 1, the economy continues to be efficient. This is based on the decline of the incremental capital output ratio. Lower incremental capital output ratio translates to greater efficiency of the economy. Total factor productivity is increasing, which means that compared to previous years, growth was driven by more and more factor accumulation. More capital, more land, more people. Today, what we are seeing is growth is driven by greater productivity of those factors of production. And these 2 charts on and below would indicate to us that labor market fundamentals are favorable. 1, we have a very young population. 2, they're educated. And 3, they're well trained. And there is a great shift of employment from informal to the formal sector of the economy, which means that there is greater labor protection, wages are higher, and therefore there is protection of labor. Now, the other way to look at it is, can we sustain this kind of growth of 77 quarters or 19 years of economic growth? Now, this is good for business because even at this early time, we are now addressing potential obstacles to economic growth. Many middle-income countries will find themselves trapped in what we call middle-income trap. In a middle-income trap, middle-income countries find their infrastructure aging after so many years of continuous growth. Their labor becomes aged. Okay? In other words, you have an old set of infrastructure and you have old people running the show. Now here, this chart will show that the government intends to increase its infrastructure spending relative to GDP from 5.4 to around 7.3%. And in peso terms, that translates to more than 800 billion pesos to around 1.8 trillion pesos by 2022. Where do we get the money? Well, that's where trade comes in. Okay? There is a sacrifice, but it is a sacrifice to me that is worth taking. Because over time, the alternative to putting up infrastructure and funding it is by way of borrowing. We don't want to borrow very much to fund infrastructure. It's a cross. It's a combination between raising taxes, funding all of these infrastructure projects, or you borrow your way out. But borrowing means 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now, future generations will have to confront the issue of debt servicing. So I think it's a good combination will be a combination of taxes, some borrowing, strategic ODAs or official development assistance loans where you have longer maturity and lower interest rates. And this is shown by the fact that your domestic savings are no longer enough to fund domestic investments. Now this is shown by the recent increase in the current account deficit. If we want to grow more, we need to invest more. But domestic savings at this point may not be enough. So you have to rely on foreign savings. And that's the reason why you have a current account, you have a current account deficit that is growing. And this is shown by the increase of investments beyond what the domestic savings can do. Now, where is the SMEs here? Well, the SMEs, from the perspective of the BSP, are important ingredients to a sustainable, more inclusive growth. So what did we do? Number one, we allowed the banks to do the so-called branch light, as well as MBOs or micro-banking offices, because we realized that putting up branches in small towns may be expensive from the perspective of the banks. So we allowed them to put up this less expensive business model. Second, we also provided support so that consumer protection and financial education will be made available to small businesses. It's important that our small businesses are literate, economically and financially literate. And we, the BSP, is pursuing this program. And finally, we have the Credit Surety Fund program. This leverages on the cooperative movements in the Philippines. We have done 51 CSFs all over the Philippines. And Senator Bam Aquino was our champion in legislating the CSF into law. So now CSFs have a legal personality so that all of these contributions of the co-ops will have legal personality, they have a legal basis, and we have to thank Senator Aquino for this. This allows the SMEs to borrow from the banks without collateral and without credit history. And they can borrow 10 times their minimum contribution of 100,000. So if there are small businesses here, you have 200,000, you can borrow 2 million from the bank. I will not be long because I think my time is up. The point that I want to say here is that we also have to leverage on technology, on the digital age, so that doing business will be brought down, the cost of doing business will be brought down. We have risks, and I think we're all familiar with these risks. Political and policy uncertainty, you know the meaning of those flags. Rise of protectionist policies away from multilateralism, and finally, uncertainty in the pace of US Fed policy and normalization. Among the domestic risks, I think we have to mention, number one, inflationary pressures. Number two, the increase in excise taxes, particularly on oil and sweetened beverages, and also tobacco products. And finally, global commodity prices. I think we will continue to be a leader in Asia based on the World Bank, IMF, and the ADB testimonies. Business outlook remains favorable. This is both business and consumer expectation survey, which are leading indicators to the business outlook. So I have some key takeaways. One, there is a shared responsibility between the public and the private sector in making sure that no Filipino is left behind. While the central bank is in charge of the overall macroeconomy, we also find it reasonable and urgent and compelling to push for inclusive growth through inclusive finance. Second, the Philippine economy is in a position of strength to weather volatilities and uncertainties in the operating environment. So we have to brace ourselves and prepare that, unlike before, there could be more challenges ahead of us. And finally, the key to achieving the goal of inclusive growth and sustaining the economy's current growth momentum requires all of us to continue going big by going small. Again, thank you very much for your patience. Mabuhay po tayo lahat.